Hey everybody, Jeff Salzman here, and welcome to the Daily Evolver. It's Thursday, November 16th. It's a week from Thanksgiving, and I am thankful to be here and thankful to be here with Corey DeVos of Integral Live. Hey, Corey.
Hey, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. I'm, evolving incrementally, you might say, in a daily fashion.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, and that's what I want to do again here today. I want to note that this is the last week before the holidays kick in, and we are going to take next week off. So we will be back here on Monday, the 27th, for another week, Monday through Thursday, of live episodes. So daily evolving. And what I want to do is, look at well, just as in a general sense, look at our lives as much as possible with an integral sensibility. That is, turn up the Google map and see more of what's actually there, see the textures, see the details of what's really happening. And what is coming up is Thanksgiving. And so we want to sort of look at it using this bigger context, liberating it, if you will, into this bigger context. And so the first thing I'd notice if I bring an integral lens to Thanksgiving as part of my integral Thanksgiving practice is that it is a deep structure of the human structure of the human psyche. It represents the Harvest Festival, which is a collective structure. It's an individual structure, and all cultures in all times and spaces have celebrated these yearly cycles. And to the degree that they're far enough from the equator to notice, they generally cluster around the two solstices and the two equinoxes. And so this is that for us here in America. This Thanksgiving is a harvest festival. And we want to feel that. We want to feel this gathering of the year's work, stopping, pausing, noticing, appreciating, containing, appreciating our gifts, being grateful for what we've been given. And, that's another sort of way we can look at this is, what is this thing called gratitude? And it is a time-honored practice of spiritual growth, of vertical development in the spiritual line, to practice the act of gratitude. And you just want to notice it. I mean, I notice it here in my own body in this moment, that when I think about my gratitude for being here, right here in this moment, it's an energy moving out. It's not a contraction of the Jeff contraction. It sort of begs the question, who are we grateful to? What are we grateful for? And, it is itself a force field. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But I wanted to just sort of work with this sort of, deeper structures and notice that, okay, here in America, I noticed that there's Thanksgiving feasts and harvest feasts all over the world, in Europe and so forth. So you all have your version of it. But here in America, we located the first Thanksgiving. It's part of our national myth. And in 1621, the Pilgrims who had come over on the Mayflower celebrated their first harvest. And they celebrated it with 90 Indians and 53 Pilgrims. And I always thought that was, an American story, kind of like George Washington chopped down the cherry tree and couldn't tell a lie. And, these sort of wonderful apocryphal stories that aren't really true if you look at them. But this one kind of is. It's the Pilgrims had come over, and they had a hellacious couple years of sickness and, just getting their footing. And apparently there was some significant amount of time before they even encountered the Indians. And And so, this, and they really did trade. They really did learn from each other, and they really did celebrate this harvest with, a 3-day celebration, actually. And it's interesting to me that it helps to illuminate a polarity that you find in how we view our history. And it's alive in anthropology. And it's this idea of what's the nature of indigenous people, of people at the archaic and even tribal stages of development. And, there's this story that they are happy and that they are healthy and that they are living in a paradise and they're living in harmony with nature. And it turns out that there's a lot of truth to that. Of course, on the other side of the street, there's the story of the nasty, brutish, and short that, and we know this through forensic anthropology, that death by violence per capita was much higher, multiple times higher than it is in the worst of our communities here in indigenous times. And I think, what we can draw from this is that when people meet in a way that is non-competitive, it can go really well. People actually are interested in each other. They want to know, what do you have? What do I have? And as long as there's not a struggle for something that you both want, it can go really well. But that's, of course, not how it continued here with the Pilgrims and the Indians. So 1621, it was good. 25 years later, it started getting to the point where there were so many English people coming over that there was beginning to be problems. Indian men were banished from Plymouth outside. They were banished to outside the gates. They were felt to be dangerous. And then, of course, by the time another 25 years had passed, we had moved into full-on Indian wars in New England that were, in terms of per capita people killed, the highest in American history. Estimates as to 1/10 of men of fighting age died in those wars. So, it went bad. And of course, from an integral perspective, it's inevitable that the settlers would win that war because as we look through history, every emerging stage subjugates or eliminates the previous stage. And a post-Bronze Age culture is, it's inevitable that however we slice and dice it and how it goes, and it was brutal, that they're ultimately going to win. So anyway, so that brings us to today, and all is forgiven. And we have this holiday that is dedicated to this force field of gratitude. And that's about it. My guy Chuck always calls Thanksgiving his favorite holiday because you don't have to buy anything. You don't have to do a lot of decorating. You just, generally have a nice dinner with people that you feel close to. And at any rate, it's an opportunity to intentionally practice gratitude and to sort of tap in intentionally into this force field. And that's, what I'm going to spend the next week doing. I'm going to actually work on this and have been even in thinking about it in preparation for this little talk. So anyway, we can work with gratitude at every stage of every level of our own development, of every altitude that we can contact. And I was listening to a video between Eckhart Tolle and Oprah about gratitude. She had him on in this webcast that they did together. And he was talking about this force field of gratitude and how, when you are feeling grateful, you are just naturally relaxing your self-contraction. You are aerating into the world in a way that you aren't when you're, not feeling gratitude. And so what they were focused on was that you can always be grateful, even if everything else has gone wrong. You can always be grateful for the sheer fact of existence. And Oprah was talking about the breath. Oprah's all meditation enlightened and woke. And of course, Eckhart Tolle was just focused on the sheer feeling of being, and the feeling in your hands, and the feeling of the energy of your body, and of the energy of the world outside, and the energy of other people. And to just notice that at what we would call an egocentric level. This is just the level of your own body and subtle body and energy body and your mind. And so that's always something that one can contact in the way of gratitude. And then there's an ethnocentric stage of development. And this is where you have a gratitude for the people in your lineage, in your parents, the people that you love. There's a lot of research that shows, Keith Witt talks about this a lot, that marriages and relationships in general the quality of them can be measured in terms of the degree to which individuals feel appreciated by their spouse, valued by their spouse, and acknowledged when they do something nice for their spouse. And, you can feel that in your own relationship. And you can extrapolate that, of course, to any relationship in your life with your kids or with anybody. And there was a big movement in psychology starting in the mid to late 90s where psychology said to itself, let's not just focus on pathologies, let's focus on what is it to make a human being happy and, fulfilled. And so we had this whole positive psychology move, which has really, been a lot of research in there, a lot of attention paid to that. And I'm forgetting her name. I had it. It's like a Russian name, but she was a researcher in Russia, in Harvard, that wrote a book on happiness. And they did a lot of research on what made people self-report as being happy. And there was one thing that was more powerful than anything else that they correlated with. And that is, if you write a letter of gratitude to somebody who has done something to you in your life, for you in your life, a teacher or, a policeman or whatever it might be, a friend, and write them a letter about how you are grateful to them, and then hand deliver it. And that was the thing that kept people happy for 2 months or something like that. It was a long time. And so I always loved that, and have done that to one of my professors in my college. And it was a very, very powerful experience for him and me. And, I should do it again. Of course, a gratitude journal. Oprah is all about the gratitude journal. And it's just a matter of writing down what you're grateful for, whether it's a flower or it's something that somebody did for you. And it's best not to do it by rote, do it a couple times a week, not necessarily every day. Don't just list things, but list details about a few things. It's better to do that than to do a list of a lot of things. And because, what we're doing is actually feeling. We're intentionally bringing online this reorientation of our subtle body to an more aerated space through gratitude. So that's on sort of the ethnocentric level with, the people in our lives that we love, So then the nation-centric, we can be grateful for a country where we are free. And that's true for so many people in the developed world, a historic number. And that, freedom's always a sort of dicey. On the right wing, we want to be free from control. We don't want the government to be controlling our lives and, monitoring what we say. And, I can do a podcast on why Donald Trump has a very small amygdala and not be hauled away the next day. It's really wonderful. And in our left-wing impulses, we are free from want. In a historical way, we're living in a paradise where, are generally, of course, there are little pockets of exceptions, but they prove the rule that our biggest problem with calories is we have too many of them. And that's new in history. And that's something to pause, be grateful for. My goodness, it didn't have to be this way. It may not always be this way. So, and yet we can get caught up, and we talk about this a lot on the Daily Evolver here. We can get caught up in the culture war that, everybody, just because we're living in a paradise doesn't mean that we can't all be worked up and mad. And that, Donald Trump is driving us all around the bend. But even, from our different corners, the left and the right and the progressives and the conservatives and whatever, everybody actually is in the game of trying to make a better world for their grandchildren by their lights. We may disagree with their whole thinking, but that is what they're motivated by. So we can be grateful for that, actually. And we can be grateful for the fight itself, because in a center of gravity modern world, which we live in, a world of laws, not men, these wars are nonviolent. And that, again, there's exceptions, but they prove the rule that it's better to have a culture war than a war between cultures. And that the other thing that we can be grateful for about the war that we're in, and again, these fights are fruitful, but they're also, in addition to being nonviolent, they're optional. You don't have to participate, not really. And I know people who aren't in a new way, and it feels like a liberation for them. And I'm not in the ways I used to, and that feels like a liberation for me. So I think that's actually one thing that we can do this weekend, if we want to, Thanksgiving, is to just opt out and of the culture wars, and maybe tune out of a lot of the news. Just keep up with headlines. Nothing's going to get by us. And particularly this Thanksgiving meal itself. I mean, it's a joke. It's sort of an ongoing joke with people that this is where you have to sit down with the people that you wouldn't necessarily have with friends, that they're your relatives. And some of them may be sort of on the other side of the spectrum from you. But again, they're just trying to make sense of this crazy world like you are. And we can be more curious than critical. We can drop the project of trying to influence them and turn the tables and be willing to be influenced. These are just trying on some of these new things that, represent a dropping of the project of trying to fix people, and to just love them instead and appreciate them and be grateful for them. So, I love that as a practice, and I find it to be very, very fruitful. So, and then we can be grateful in a world-centric way and be grateful that we are living in a world that is, in very important ways, waking up and growing up. And that, yes, we have big problems as we evolve from the growth model of modernity to the sustainability model of post-modernity. Climate change, oceans, all of that good stuff. But there's also, and we want to remember this piece too, lest we get bummed, is that there's so much to be grateful for. There's a great raveling going on in the world. There's more people living in peace, having enough to eat, kids being educated. I think Bill Gates a week ago announced the end of the first year without a new polio case. And so let's keep in touch with that too. And, will the good outrun the bad over the long run? I think so. But even if I'm wrong, I want to be grateful for the good stuff and see those trends that, to the degree that we can pull out and see a, 15,000 foot view and a 30,000 foot view, that delivers us into a new stage of gratitude. And that's a cosmos-centric gratitude. And that is the gratitude. It sort of goes back to the egocentric, where you're just sort of grateful to be alive. And the cosmocentric version of that is, I'm just grateful that there's something instead of nothing. It's sort of the first question of philosophy. Why is there something instead of nothing? What was up with this Big Bang 13.8 billion years ago? And what preceded it? And does anything in, the whole koan of the awe of a cosmocentric view just comes online. And we can see that there is, a trajectory. There is a teleology, apparently, that, things keep complexifying into ever unfolding stages of goodness, truth, and beauty. If we look at the longer term, it's like that old joke. How do you get the complete works of Shakespeare? Well, first you take a big mess of hydrogen and then you leave it alone for 13.8 billion years. So there's something going on here. And, we want to be grateful for that too. So, Thanksgiving's coming, and I wish you all a good one. And I would love to hear how it goes. And you can always contact me at jeff@dailyevolver.com by email, or you can send me a little voice memo through that as well. And I love hearing from you, and I love having, good, succinct questions or comments that are suitable for playing on the show. And so I appreciate that. And I appreciate you, Corey.
I was just going to say, man.
Integral Life and Integral Live hosting me, and that you have been, you made that happen. And thank you, man. Thank you, brother.
Absolutely, my friend. I was about to say the exact same thing to you. I'm grateful for this presentation today. I mean, seriously, this was beautiful.
Well,
and I'm just tremendously grateful for your friendship and for having the opportunity to work with you and to play with you and to do this with you. So that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
And Thanksgiving, it's funny. When I was a kid, Thanksgiving was not my favorite holiday, mostly because of family. And now it's very much my favorite holiday, mostly because of family.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's
what do you got planned?
We're probably going to do something small. It's probably just going to be the three of us.
Have a nice little tofurkey.
Yeah, something like that. No, we go for the real bird.
Yeah.
We go for the real bird.
I do too.
And Thanksgiving is I loved how you're talking about the American myth. And this ties, obviously it ties into the show that you did yesterday when you were talking about the American identity. And it's something that I like to talk about a lot too, which is, this concept of what's called American exceptionalism. And I think that concept of American exceptionalism is often misinterpreted as meaning like this sort of arrogance that Americans have, this feeling of superiority that we have to the rest of the world. And that's at its root, that's really not what American exceptionalism is about. What it means, at least what it means to me, the way I enact the phrase is we are exceptional precisely because America was founded at a time in history when the identity at its very core did not have to be based on race, ethnicity, religion, resources. I mean, all of that factored into the American identity, but ours was not. The American identity from the very conception of this country was nothing concrete. It's this symbolic tapestry that weaves all of us together and all of our experiences together. So that to me is what makes America truly exceptional from the majority of other countries in this world, is that at its very root, our identity is largely symbolic.
Yeah.
And the American myth, it's sort of like the two halves of the American identity. You have American myth, which is sort of the poetry of the American identity. And then you have American history, which is the prose of the American identity.
Yeah, it's a nice formulation.
Yeah, well, and what I particularly love about Thanksgiving especially, as an American with our rugged individuality and, all of that we're, sort of stereotypically known for, is that this piece of gratitude was there right from the very seed, right? It's one of the first things we learn in elementary school. It's, which is the purpose of the American myth. That's what's folding all of these different experiences and all these different people, different types of people, into a shared understanding and a shared meaning of what America represents. And they start doing it right in first grade with, Tonto to, George Washington's wooden teeth. I mean, a lot of these things don't have a lot of basis in American history, but they're tremendously valuable as part of the American myth.
Right. I just want to say, just apropos that comment, that this is another sort of detail of the original Thanksgiving, that Squanto was an Indian guide, and he was famous. And I remember reading one of those little bios, like a third grade bio on Squanto as a kid. And it's making me want to go back and look more, because as I was sort of reviewing this book that I read a few years ago called Mayflower by Nathan Philbrick, which is about the whole Pilgrim thing, Squanto really featured in largely. And he was an Indian who had been kidnapped, then taken to Europe, where he was educated, and then he came back. And that sort of, you see this in history where there's a little, there's a myth around people like this, because they really do come back with a new capacity that is, anyway, it's sort of a long story, but it turns out that Squanto actually existed, and he was very cool.
Yeah. So I'm grateful for the fact that, again, gratitude was there from the very beginning, and sort of the initial seeds that this country grew from, which I think helped, in a lot of ways, contain and temper the American sort of swagger that we have, the American cockiness.
Well, I always love what Obama said about American exceptionalism. Of course, nobody remembers this part, but he said every country is exceptional. Yes, we're exceptional, and we're exceptional in the ways you just described. And, this whole new continent and all of that good stuff. But every country feels their own karmic exceptionalism and their own particular flavor of being a human being. And they want that to be added, as we integrate, is it in an integral stage of development. We get really curious. We don't want to, change it. We want to appreciate it just for what it is and be grateful for it.
Yep.
So it's interesting to see new cultures coming online and, new human creativity coming online, and just appreciating it.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
The Big Bang continues to bang.
Yeah.
In each one of us.
It's still unfolding.
Yeah. I mean, that's how the Big Bang's happening, is where each of us are having another moment.
That's right. That's right. Jeff, the other thing I'm sort of fascinated by is Thanksgiving is one of these interesting holidays that sort of straddles the line between traditional and secular. And it started it was a Christian, a very Christian celebration that was, also unfolding the Native American tradition, and which I think is also demonstrative of how powerful and sort of trans-traditional gratitude actually is.
Oh, totally.
But it's one of the few holidays that, when it made that transition from traditional to secular, it's one of the few holidays where sort of the meaning of the holiday actually was enhanced in that. It's not like Christmas, where Christmas we're like, oh, it's a time for materialism and, to make a quick buck and to send out our Black Friday mail.
No, it's the baby Jesus.
Guys. What's that?
It's the baby Jesus.
Yeah, right.
Don't forget the baby Jesus.
Can never forget baby Jesus.
Yes, but you're right. Baby Jesus has been sublimated to commercial interests.
Yeah, so much of it gets lost in that secularization. Whereas with Thanksgiving, I feel like it actually deepens, because it's such a simple holiday, and it makes gratitude its centerpiece.
That's true.
Whether you're religious or not, you can participate in this practice. And as you were saying earlier, and especially this year of all years, when our anxieties and our tensions and our stresses are at like a record high, for a lot of us anyway, gratitude is the panacea, right? I mean, we live in an era that can be very frustrating because there's at once way too much cynicism and not nearly enough critical thinking. That is, and the combination of those two makes negativity very tempting.
Yeah, well, criticism. I mean, the opposite of criticism is gratitude, in a sense. In
a certain sense,
yeah.
Yep.
And I think you can do both.
Yep.
And you want to do both.
That's right.
But we're not programmed for the gratitude. The gratitude is swimming upstream for us a little bit.
It is.
It doesn't come naturally because it's not necessarily that evolutionarily potent on the sort of physical stages of development. Wanting more, getting away from danger, that sort of thing. That's what's really potent there. Gratitude starts coming online in more of a subtle and causal way. Or, you can be grateful to the spirits at every stage or God. But this sort of general gratitude to the moment, that's a higher activity.
Yeah, well, it requires empathy, and which itself requires the capacity to take a perspective.
Yeah.
Which comes a little more easily for some people than the others. But that's exactly the power of the practice. And, the other thing of it, too, is, and I love how you went through sort of egocentric, ethnocentric, world-centric, cosmocentric layers of gratitude, because it's the other great thing about a practice of gratitude is it allows you to sort of suss out where your points of resistance are, right? As you're practicing gratitude, you'll almost assuredly notice that gratitude is a lot easier to apply to some things than it is to others, right? So as you're, sort of rippling your gratitude out, just sort of get a sense of where something might be stuck, where you feel that, warmth kind of routing around rather than penetrating. I mean, for example, can you be grateful for Donald Trump? I can find ways to be grateful for Donald Trump.
You had to go to the hard one right away, didn't you?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I can be grateful for some of the positive outcomes of his tenure so far. I could do that. That's good enough. It's better than a reflexive just repulsion and disgust, which is sort of my starting point every morning.
Well, and my gratitude for Donald Trump gets a lot easier for me to extend once I start trying to consciously empathize with Donald Trump's formative years.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. And the minute I see sort of the insane amount of pressure and, I mean, my sense is that Donald Trump's parents would not have fit in very well here in Boulder, Colorado. I'll just, I guess put it that way. And that turned Donald Trump into the person that he is. And it's just interesting that when I visualize Donald Trump, the 9-year-old boy, it's a lot easier for me to be empathetic and for me to extend my gratitude for his existence.
Oh, well, I think you're calling on your dad energy.
That could be.
Yeah. I mean, that's sweet. And it's true. And we did the thing, I think it was the very first one of these daily shows we did was talking about the research in people who lack empathy. And these children who, they used to be called psychopathic. Now they have an empathy disorder and there's a whole spectrum. And Donald Trump is textbook. Mm-hmm. And it's they have a upper right corollary, and that is they tend to have a very small amygdala.
Right.
And so it, that actually helps me to look at Donald Trump and have, I don't know if gratitude, but at least it's sympathy and not seeing him as another so much.
Well, especially if you can empathize with how much that fact in the upper right quadrant must limit his experience.
Yeah, it's a disability.
In the upper left, that's right.
It's a pernicious disability.
Yeah.
But nevertheless.
That's right.
So so that's a good practice. It's if we define practice as the thing we do to be faithful, not necessarily successful.
That's right. That's right. And it's
and I will be grateful for Donald Trump.
Yep. And I will be grateful when Weller brings him down. I mean, don't get me wrong. So it's almost, that's the other thing that makes it easier for me to be grateful for Donald Trump when I then transition into, well, I'm also grateful for Mueller.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Yeah, totally. All right, my friend. Well, are we complete, perfect, and whole?
You know it.
Well, thank you, Corey. And
yeah, thank you.
Much love to you and Angie and little Evelyn.
Well, thanks, brother.
I'm trying.
And you know, one final word. I'm grateful for everyone who's watching right now.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for everyone who is part of the Integral Project and is working in their own way to expand this beautiful thing that we're doing together, and to carry it within your own sphere of influence, and to try every single day to live up to whatever this means to you, to continuously try to wake up, to grow up, to clean up, and to show up. Lord knows it ain't easy. Lord knows we, all of us fail every single day, and all of us are likely grateful for the opportunity to try.
Yeah, beautifully said, my friend. Yeah. Yes, thank you, everybody. So we'll see you Monday after next.
That's right.
Thanks, folks.
Bye, guys.